Hello, everyone, and welcome to the week ahead. This week we start with a first quarter square. And Jeffrey Wolf Green quotes Dane Rudyard in his book when he says that the first quarter square is a crisis in action. What does that mean? Well, remember, we had this Capricorn new moon just a few days ago, really, on December 31st. And at that time, we were planting seeds of intention. But having an intention is meaningless if we are not actively taking action to create the change necessary to expand into the intention itself. Now, often in the new moon phase, we are planting seeds in the darkness. We don't know how our desires, our intentions are going to come about. That's kind of one of the, tricks, I guess, from the new age realm of manifestation. It's like you set the intention, you let it go, you make the vision board or whatever, you put the picture on there, and then you let the universe bring it to you. But for the most part, from an evolutionary perspective, we don't let the universe just bring evolution to us. Often, evolution is happening because we're being triggered, we're being challenged, we're being pressurized through our experience to change. And yet, with the expansion from the new moon to the first quarter square, we need to take action because what's emerging in our consciousness, what's emerging in our evolutionary journey, needs legs in order to grow. And interestingly enough, we're at this time where Mars in its retrograde is back in the sign of Cancer. And then we have the moon moving, which is the ruler of Cancer, moving through Aries, which is Mars's sign. And we're in the last few days of the nodal axis in Aries Libra. So this is a very important and insignificant time where the impulses that we have to change are really bubbling up from the deeper places of our psychological, emotional body. And they're coming up to the surface, maybe through means of frustration, irritation, emotional challenges, feeling kind of pushed in our wounds. It can be that our belief system or our vision is challenged in a way because we no longer feel the way we did about our lives, about the past, but we are not yet in a place where we have kind of expanded into the new reality. We might have desires to be living a different way, to be in a different kind of relationship, to be relating to our work differently, to be doing different things with our money or our resources. But we might actually be in the challenges that promote that emotional growth, right? I recently, have been involved in a situation with a family member who didn't have the resources for their basic needs. And they reached out to other family members of ours and asked for help, which in one respect is a deeply courageous thing to do. And I was really holding this in prayer this week, and a lot of that prayer was answered, and that she was receiving the help that she needed temporarily. But it wasn't really prompting, nor was it addressing the long-term issue of what needs to change in order for the situation to be workable. And many of the people in my family were bringing forward this question of like, well, how do we assess this? What do we try and do? It's a very Capricorn thing of like, there are all these government resources. There are these things that you can do to handle and solve this problem. And yet when I was looking at it and in my, humble attempts to try and um, educate my family, there to really explain to them that this is a more complex situation than what they were trying to address on the surface. And it was not a situation where they could address it by means of government support or social systems, right? That is one of the limitations of our post Pluto and Capricorn society, is that we really don't have the resources to take care of each other from a humanity perspective. And Pluto in Aquarius, certainly over the next 20 years, will push our edges of how we care for ourselves socially, emotionally, in community, in friendships, in intimacy, in partnership and relationship, and how we care for others. And a lot of that, while it does and will depend on our ability to creatively actualize, at this time with Mars and Cancer, it's depending on our ability to excavate the real emotional reality, the real underlying cause. Because we can't really find solutions or solve problems if we don't understand the root cause. And it's funny, I had the doors on my car are automatic. And right at the end of this week, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, they stopped working. And I thought, okay, I prayed, God, please let this be an easy fix that doesn't cost me a lot right now. Like, let me just take it. And I took it. Circumstances in my life changed all of a sudden, so that this morning I was forced to be going to the area where the car dealership was. And so I just made a decision to like deal with it, to get it done, right? That's a crisis of action. There was a problem in my family, things needed to change in order to help someone else who wasn't feeling well. And I had to make a decision to pivot, even though it wasn't what I wanted to be doing in that time, in that moment. And it wasn't what I wanted to be doing with my day, but I did it anyways. And when I got to the dealership, they said, "Oh, let me just go out and take a look at your car. There's a function, there's a button that I didn't know about that turns the power on and off to the doors." And so somebody had pressed it either accidentally or maybe my toddler was in the front seat. Who knows? Right? Who knows how it happened, but all of the circumstances aligned so that I could get that resolved and it didn't cost me a thing, right? That we could call that again manifestation, an answer to my prayers. It just happened that way. Um, this is kind of the energy of these crises. And I'm pointing out these situations where I didn't want to be in that situation. Of course, nobody wants to be in a compromised situation where their wounds are activated or where they feel vulnerable or where they feel afraid, where they feel financially, emotionally, physically challenged. But often it is those very situations and the nature of those crises that prompt us into action to do something, to resolve something. And, our open-mindedness, our trust in the process, our faith that everything is really working out for our good, whether we recognize it or not, is what moves the needle towards our own evolution. It's really, are we cooperating with evolution or are we resisting it? And I wouldn't say that if we're having an emotional response to what's happening, that it's resisting our evolution. That can actually be the very power intrinsic within our experience that allows us to get free of something that had previously challenged us. We have this inconjunct that's happening as Mercury is in the galactic center, which is these last degrees of Sagittarius, before Mercury enters Capricorn. and makes a square to the nodal axis. This square of Mercury to the nodal axis this week will be the final square that Mercury makes with the nodes in Aries, Libra. So, one, I would say this is probably going to elicit some resolution on the Capricorn side of things, financial, resource wise, our structure, the structure stability of our life that we need for the things that we need in order to survive. Masculine, feminine, mother, father, right? We need these elements of life, structure, control, support, emotions, vulnerability. We need to have our will in right alignment with our relationships, the what we want versus what I want, right? They can't be in competition to one another. We actually have to have time and space to communicate with each other and figure out how do we restructure our lives in order to meet our basic emotional, physical, financial, relational needs. We could pinpoint all of those places. And right now, while Mercury is making this square to the nodes, the resolution node is the South Node in Libra. Now, this has been a very consistent theme of this last year that the resolution node was the South Node. That means going back to the past, resolving past dynamics, bringing fruition to that through the crisis of the desire to change. And what's the resolution point, the opposition point to Mercury? It's Cancer. It's our vulnerability. It's our sensitivity. It's our attunement to our emotional body. And this week, the moon is going to move through Taurus, as that's ruled by Venus. And Venus has moved into the sign of Pisces. Now, Venus in Pisces is romantic, beautiful, imaginative, but also can have an element of um, disillusionment and disappointment. I was thinking the other day, people say all the time, "Oh, I'm a hopeless romantic," meaning that what you really love romance and, you're a sucker for a good rom-com film. For me, I realized, well, I'm actually a hopeful romantic. Hopeful in the sense that I recognize I haven't realized the kind of experience of romantic love that I desire for myself. But I have ultimate faith that my creator, that God wants for me to know what it is to have true love, that my desire to return to source from an evolutionary perspective, my bottom line desire to know God's love is number one and most important in my life. But that doesn't replace my desire for romantic fulfillment in my life. It doesn't replace my desire to have flowers and kisses and affection and intimacy and connection. But it can't become more valuable, right? This is Venus in front of Saturn, in front of Neptune. It can't become more valuable than the love of God and the ultimate, you know, lessons that the human experience can only bring us so much, right? People are going to disappoint us. We're going to have expectations that are unmet. We're going to have needs that are unmet. If we have a core story about ourselves and our lives that includes this lack of fulfillment, not being good enough, not being loved, having constant emotional turmoil, having a constant healing or suffering story about whatever it is in our life. It can be love, it can be romance, it can be relationships, right? What are the Venus things? Money, sex, relationships, our work. It can be all the things that we sort of put those projection glasses on and we look at other people and we say, wow, they've got it. They've got the thing that I want. They must be so happy. But of course, whenever those things are so far from us, it can really be a struggle. I was really reflecting this week on how if we've maintained a posture of suffering for too long, it can often be very difficult to bring our minds to maintaining a posture of healing. So, for example, if we become accustomed, um, one of my friends, her little boy broke his arm, and she said that even though they took the cast off, he wasn't able to move his arm back to its original position because it had been in the cast for so long, the muscles atrophied. Well, we can have that in our own life where we've been in a state of struggle or suffering, whether it's financial, emotional, in our careers, in our relationships, in our family, in our creative work, in our emotional body, where we've sort of atrophied into that broken state, even though that's not necessarily who we are, even though it's not necessarily what's going to happen next, right? Or what's coming for us, what's unfolding in our life, what's the truth. And even though it's not necessarily what we desire or what we deserve, we can still be kind of stuck in a place where we're meeting those parts of ourselves that are still suffering, even if suffering is off the table or it's not on the horizon anymore. It's interesting, we have Venus moving towards Saturn, which can be a long-term commitment and energy of commitment. And we also have Saturn, Venus is going to square Jupiter coming up in this week. We have Saturn ruling the sun and Mercury, and Saturn is ruling that square to the node. So there's something about our deep conditioning. There's something about maybe our relationships to our fathers or external authorities, partners, people where, this can be like religious leaders or spiritual teachers, Jupiter, Saturn, people who have a sense of authority outside of us, where we're really struggling to get unstuck from past places or views, perceptions of them, and coming into what is actually true for us now. Um, I know one of the things I've been reflecting on in my life is a lot has to do with the scriptures and whether I ultimately believe that it's the word of God or the stories of man, and I don't have a perfect answer for you. But I continue to wrestle with the questions inside of me, um, and the meaning, right? And Pisces especially has to do with our relationship to unconditional love, but to ultimate meaning, to universal truth. And universal truth is not the same as personal truth, personal opinion. It's not the same as dogma. It's something that can only be defined by that it actually applies to all beings everywhere all the time, right? It's universal. It's not exclusive to a group of people. It's not exclusive to a time and place. Same thing with unconditional love, right? It's not conditional to a way of behaving or to a way of being, right? But it's complete and whole unto itself, meaning that it can't be given and it can't be taken. And two really, really significant things happened this week as we move from this first quarter square to this full moon in Cancer. Is that right before the day before the full moon, we have the last day of the nodal axis. Then the nodes of the moon move backwards into Pisces and Virgo. And then the moon comes into Cancer, and we will have a full moon followed at 24 degrees Cancer here on Monday. next week, followed by a Moon Mars conjunction in Cancer with the moon ruling that Mars. So this particular full moon Monday really could come with a heightened emotional aspect. If I was looking at this from a weather perspective, I would say, wow, we're going to have really high tides at this time. It will definitely be, more intense weather. And, when we're navigating astrological weather, right, we have our free will and our choice. Do we resist evolution or do we cooperate? And when we do cooperate with evolution, ultimately things get moved. And I think that there's some grace that happens for us because the cooperation of with our evolutionary intention, our desires, the desires of our soul, especially, sometimes we call that a flow state or whatnot. But when we are doing that, we're moving ourselves forward evolutionarily. We are getting, set up in our being with, we're getting set up in a way that gives us what we're needing, even if it isn't necessarily what we're wanting. There's that song that says you can't always get what you want, but try sometimes and you just might get what you need, right? We get what we need from an evolutionary perspective. It's not always what we want, but ultimately it gives way to giving us what we need, and that often can bring us to what we want, right? The difficult crisis that grows us emotionally ends up giving us the emotional stamina, the resilience, the capacity to change that brings us closer to the healthy, healed relationship to the thing that we've been struggling with. We got there, but in a roundabout way. And this is the kind of week to get there in a roundabout way. So, my friends, that's our week ahead. If there's something in this message that touched your heart, please let me know in the comments or leave me a little like prayer hands emoji, some love. I love hearing from you and knowing how you're doing. Um, as we begin this year, you have some opportunities to study with me. This Friday, January 10th, I'm beginning my live practice classes. I'll be doing live practice for Love Evolution. So we're going to go through Venus and Pisces, Pluto and Aquarius, and I'll be doing live practice for my Foundations of Astrology, which is my beginner's class introducing evolutionary astrology. So if you want to join me for those live practice classes, all of the details to sign up is in the link to the description to this video and on my website, astrologywithmichelle.com. Feel free to email me or get in touch if you have any questions. I hope to see you in class. I hope this video helps you, and I hope you have a blessed and beautiful week, my friends. And bye for now.